It was quiet, subtle, almost buried in a sea of royal updates. But make no mistake, Prince Edward's decision to walk away from Buckingham Palace has shaken the foundation of the royal family. The announcement was brief, formal, and characteristically underplayed. The Duke of Edinburgh will relocate his offices outside of Buckingham Palace. Yet, behind the curtain, the implications are thunderous. After decades of loyal service, the Queen's youngest son is stepping away from the royal epicenter. Royal insiders were reportedly caught off guard. This wasn't a slow fade into retirement. It was a calculated, sudden move that left aides scrambling and courtiers whispering. Why now? And more importantly, why at all? Buckingham Palace has long represented more than bricks and gilded corridors. It's the symbolic heart of the monarchy, the place where duty overrides desire. For Edward to turn his back on it, even partially, signals something deeper and more personal. Something that goes beyond official titles or schedules. This is a man who, for decades, held the institution's quiet weight, now walking away from its beating heart. Public reactions mirrored royal confusion. Some praised Edward's quiet courage, calling him the first senior royal since Queen Elizabeth's passing to challenge the machine without scandal. Others worried what his absence means for the aging monarchy, especially with Charles's health under scrutiny and Harry and Meghan long gone. But one thing is certain: Prince Edward's exit from Buckingham Palace isn't just a logistics decision. It's a philosophical rupture in a monarchy battling to stay modern, human, and intact. But to truly understand this moment, this subtle rebellion in a house built on obedience, we have to rewind, back to where it all began. The palace nursery, the royal corridors, and the shadow of older brothers. Before Edward made headlines, he was the quiet prince. But even quiet voices grow tired of echo chambers. The youngest son of Queen Elizabeth II. Born on March 10, 1964, Prince Edward entered the world as the fourth and youngest child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. Unlike Charles, who carried the weight of the crown from birth, or Andrew, who quickly became the more controversial sibling, Edward was the quiet one, the invisible prince. Raised in Buckingham Palace with a blend of military rigidity and royal protocol, he never demanded the spotlight. But he absorbed everything. His childhood was steeped in tradition, hierarchy, and, above all, duty. From the beginning, Edward appeared more introspective than his siblings. He watched more than he spoke. While Charles wrestled with the burden of future kingship, and Andrew indulged in youthful flamboyance, Edward seemed more reserved, more cautious. Palace staff recall a child who loved reading, who asked sharp questions, and who seemed genuinely curious about life outside the gates of Buckingham Palace. But that sense of distance from public expectation and palace hierarchy would shape his entire life. He didn't want the throne. He wanted something real. That desire would drive much of Edward's adult decisions, often putting him at odds with the royal machinery that raised him. While other royals leaned into tradition, Edward drifted toward a different kind of life. Not rebellious like Harry, not explosive like Andrew, just different, independent, quietly self-aware. And as we now see, that foundation of emotional detachment may have been a quiet preparation for his departure all along. That quiet determination would soon become visible. As his brothers clung to military uniforms and ceremonial swords, Edward charted an entirely different course. One that would baffle the palace, anger the press, and signal the first real crack in his royal shell. His weapon of choice? Not war, but art and film. Edward's early career choices. Breaking tradition. While Charles and Andrew followed military traditions, Edward stunned royal advisors by announcing he wanted to work in theater and television. To the monarchy, this was heresy. A royal in rehearsals, writing scripts, producing television. But Edward wasn't trying to scandalize. He was trying to breathe. In 1993, he founded Ardent Productions, a media company aimed at producing documentaries and entertainment content. The reaction was swift and brutal. Palace courtiers considered it undignified. The British press mocked him relentlessly. And worse, many within the family saw it as a vanity project, an unnecessary distraction from public service. But for Edward, it was never about ego. It was about purpose. He wanted to understand better how storytelling shaped the public. He believed the monarchy should be more transparent, more accessible. But his timing, still deep in the post-Diana tabloid. Storm wasn't right. The media didn't want nuance. They wanted failure, and Ardent struggled. The company hemorrhaged money and credibility. Controversies erupted, especially when Ardent was accused of filming Prince William at university without permission, an incident that deeply upset the Queen and led to Edward being formally reprimanded. That moment marked a turning point. The message from the monarchy was clear. There is no room for independence. You're either in or you're out. And for Edward, the dream of balancing creativity with royal duty was shattered. But even as Ardent closed its doors, Edward's sense of identity remained tied to something other than Buckingham Palace walls. The media had its victory. Ardent collapsed. But Edward did not. Instead, he did what few expected. He returned. Not as the artist he once aspired to be, but as a full-time working royal. The shift was quiet, but profound. A man once chasing freedom had re-entered the royal machine. Or had he? The struggles of establishing Ardent Productions. Ardent Productions began with ambition. Edward saw the company as a bridge, a way to make royal life more human, more visible. The company's early documentaries were earnest but clunky. Critics were unforgiving. Internally, Buckingham Palace was increasingly concerned about the optics. A royal prince producing commercial content was uncharted territory, and to many, unacceptable. The most damaging moment came in 2001, when Ardent was found filming Prince William at university. The footage was harmless. The fallout was not. William, fiercely protective of his privacy, was furious. The Queen was livid. Charles, according to insiders, was deeply disappointed. The backlash forced Edward to issue a rare public apology, and within a year, Ardent quietly collapsed. What began as a dream of media innovation ended in institutional humiliation. But beneath the criticism was something deeper. Edward had tried to modernize the role of a royal, and the system had rejected him. The experience scarred him, but it also reshaped him. He returned to the fold a different man, more cautious, more loyal, but also more aware. He knew then what he knows now. The crown only tolerates creativity when it serves the system, and for Edward, that truth would haunt him for the next 2 decades, until the moment he finally stepped away. So what do you do when your dream dies? If you're Edward, you dust off the royal jacket, nod politely, and get back to work. His return to full-time royal duty marked a new chapter, not just in public service, but in quiet survival. And it started with a new alliance, Sophie, the shift to full-time royal duties. In the wake of Ardent's collapse and mounting media pressure, Prince Edward did what few expected. He leaned back into royal life. Alongside his wife, Sophie Rhys-Jones, Edward quietly transitioned into a full-time working royal role in 2002, coinciding with the Queen's Golden Jubilee. What could have been a reluctant return became a deeply committed second act. The man once branded as the creative failure was now clocking in for ribbon cuttings, hospital visits, and overseas tours with steady professionalism. Edward and Sophie became one of the monarchy's most reliable partnerships. Together, they filled the royal calendar with substance, not spectacle. There were no scandals, no attention-seeking interviews, no theatrics. Just service. From patronages in the arts and education to engagements across the Commonwealth, Edward rebuilt his reputation, one event at a time. The Queen took notice. So did the British public. Slowly, the quiet prince had become the monarchy's quiet rock. But while he smiled for the cameras, insiders say Edward never forgot what he gave up. Still, the tension between personal authenticity and public expectation never fully disappeared. Even as Edward and Sophie became central fixtures in the royal rotation, Edward reportedly kept his distance from the inner palace dynamics. He rarely participated in major family feuds. He kept his opinions private. Some took that for apathy. But in truth, Edward had learned how the machine worked and how it breaks those who challenge it. His role was now to support, but never again to disrupt. But even in support roles, pressure builds. Behind closed doors, family tensions grew, especially as public scrutiny intensified. Edward, once the invisible prince, now stood between warring factions, hungry headlines, and internal resentment. And, at the center of it all, a quiet sibling rivalry began to flare, not with Charles, but with Andrew. Family tensions and media scrutiny. The royal family has never been short on drama, but Edward often managed to stay above the fray, until conflict with his elder brother, Prince Andrew, began to quietly take shape. While Edward leaned into duty, Andrew spiraled into scandal. And yet, for years, Andrew received more attention, more funding, and, some argue, more royal favor. It didn't sit well with Edward or Sophie. In public, Edward remained diplomatic, but palace insiders claim tension simmered beneath the surface. During official events, Edward would avoid direct interaction with Andrew. After the Jeffrey Epstein allegations and Andrew's disastrous 2019 BBC interview, Edward and Sophie were reportedly among the most vocal advocates for removing Andrew from public life. The Queen, ever the traditionalist, resisted at first. But when Andrew was stripped of his duties in 2022, Edward finally felt a line had been drawn. Still, the damage to the monarchy and to Edward's sense of fairness was done. And then there was the press. Even in Edward's most dutiful years, the tabloids never forgot Ardent, never let him escape comparisons. Whenever he and Sophie stepped out, the coverage remained subdued, if not dismissive. They were the monarchy's spares, useful but never spotlighted. For a man who had once tried to build something of his own, that anonymity began to feel less like protection and more like erasure. The tension was growing, and the world didn't know how close he was to finally stepping away. And then came the whispers. Edward, once known for his robust energy, began to appear thinner, more tired. Concerned observers noticed. And while the palace dismissed the chatter as tabloid overreach, the public was seeing something different. A man worn down. And speculation about his health began to build fast. Prince Edward's health and public perception. In late 2023, royal watchers began noticing a subtle but alarming change in Prince Edward's appearance. He seemed noticeably thinner, his posture more strained. The once reliable energy he brought to public engagements had dulled. Rumors of stress, burnout, and even illness began swirling. The palace issued a standard statement. The Earl of Wessex is in excellent health. But no one was convinced. In royal tradition, health is sacred ground, guarded and never discussed. But the world has changed. After Charles's cancer diagnosis and Kate's own health battles, the British public had grown more demanding of honesty. Edward's increasingly gaunt appearance became a trending topic on social media. Was it stress, depression, or something more serious? Behind the scenes, aides admitted he was carrying too much, especially with Charles reducing duties and Anne effectively benched by palace politics. For the first time, the burden of being reliable began to show, and perhaps that was the final push. Those close to Edward say his decision to step back from Buckingham Palace was deeply personal, driven in part by health, but more so by self-preservation. He didn't want to fade away slowly under the palace's weight. He wanted to reclaim time, focus on what mattered: his family, his causes, and his peace. Whatever the reason, Edward's quiet exit spoke volumes. Even the most disciplined royals can reach a breaking point. But Edward's royal story isn't just about health or duty. It's about legacy. And that legacy is tied to a title once worn by a giant of history, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. Edward was meant to carry that torch. But now, the future of that legacy hangs in the balance. The Duke of Edinburgh title, a complicated legacy. When Prince Philip passed in 2021, the question of his historic title, the Duke of Edinburgh, loomed over the royal family. Rumors swirled that Charles, then Prince of Wales, might give it to his daughter, Princess Charlotte, in a bold attempt to modernize the system. But that idea caused quiet uproar. Edward had been promised the title by both Philip and the Queen years earlier. He had prepared for it, lived in its shadow, earned it. In March 2023, after a wave of public pressure and private deliberations, King Charles officially bestowed the title on his younger brother. It was a moment of vindication. Edward was now Duke of Edinburgh, just as his father had been. But unlike Philip, Edward had no interest in commanding headlines or dominating attention. He wanted to honor the title quietly, through his charity work and his public service, especially with the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, which he had overseen for years. But now, with his departure from Buckingham Palace, the question is sharp. What happens to the title? Will it fade into ceremonial limbo? Will it pass to another? Or will it, like so many royal institutions, be reimagined? Edward's emotional connection to his father's legacy is deep, but he has never clung to power. If stepping away from the palace means protecting his health, his marriage, and his future, he may let the title live on in function, not in name. And perhaps that's the most loyal thing a son can do. Through health, duty, and dynastic weight, Edward has carried more than the public ever saw. But at home, with Sophie, with their children, he found balance. And now, as he steps away from the epicenter of monarchy, his focus returns to the only thing that's never betrayed him: family. The role of tradition versus personal fulfillment. In a monarchy rooted in protocol, pageantry, and permanence, Prince Edward's departure from Buckingham Palace is a profound act. It's not just logistical, it's philosophical. For centuries, royals were born into a role, and that role defined their existence. But Edward's decision signals a personal rebellion. After decades of towing the line, the Duke of Edinburgh chose fulfillment over formality. And that makes his quiet move one of the most subversive acts in modern royal history. It wasn't scandalous, it wasn't dramatic. There were no tell-all interviews, no ghost-written memoirs. And yet, it may leave a deeper mark than any tabloid scandal. Edward is showing that it's possible to serve the monarchy without sacrificing oneself to it. That to be royal doesn't mean vanishing into the institution. It can mean walking beside it, not under it. His departure is a bold acknowledgement that tradition must bend if it wants to survive. And it raises questions about the balance between obligation and identity within a shrinking royal structure. Edward's exit also mirrors a broader theme across the Windsors: The growing realization that royal life, in its most rigid form, can be quietly devastating. From Harry's escape to Anne's subtle influence, from Camilla stepping back to Charles attempting reform, the House of Windsor is in existential transition. Edward's choice doesn't betray the crown. It modernizes it, because in choosing happiness, peace, and agency, he's challenging a monarchy that has, for too long, demanded silence and sacrifice in exchange for duty. But when a prince leaves the palace, even silently, the ripple is felt through every corridor. Behind closed doors, emotions stir, power recalibrates, and in the heart of the family, the decision lands with quiet force. So how did King Charles react? And what does this mean for the monarchy's internal power map? The fallout within the royal family. The moment Edward confirmed his step back, King Charles reportedly paused for several seconds in silence. According to a senior courtier, it was the kind of news that doesn't shock you, but it stays with you. Charles and Edward share decades of unspoken tension, born not of rivalry but difference. Charles is the thinker, Edward the pragmatist. And now the pragmatist has quietly walked away, leaving his brother to hold the weight alone. Privately, palace aides say the king was understandably hurt, but not surprised. The decision didn't come with confrontation. It came with a well-worded briefing and a final walk through the offices Edward would leave behind. Charles, grappling with health complications of his own, is said to be increasingly aware of how fragile the monarchy's internal support system has become. Edward, always the steady hand, was supposed to hold the middle as other royals fought or faded. Now that center is gone. The rest of the family has reacted in varied shades of discomfort. Sophie is said to be fully supportive. Princess Anne, reportedly aware of the plan in advance, has privately expressed total solidarity. But others, especially senior courtiers close to William, worry the move will put more pressure on the Prince of Wales, already burdened with premature responsibility. Within a family built on image, Edward's exit is a whispered reminder that the system they inherited may no longer be sustainable. And that realization shakes even the firmest hands. So what now? One less royal in Buckingham Palace, one fewer voice in public engagements, one more question hanging in the air. Is this the beginning of a controlled evolution, or a soft collapse? Edward's decision isn't just a moment, it's a mirror, and what it reflects could shape the future forever. What this means for the future of the royal family. Prince Edward's departure from the palace may seem like a single page, but it could redefine the entire chapter ahead. His quiet step back leaves a gap in the royal roster, at a time when the family can least afford it. With Charles facing ongoing health battles, Camilla stepping away from titles, and Harry and Meghan gone, the working royal core is shrinking fast. The monarchy has always relied on public engagement to justify its taxpayer-funded existence. Without Edward and Sophie's steady presence, the burden intensifies on William, Kate, and Anne. But Kate is recovering from surgery, and Anne is limited in public visibility. The result? A monarchy teetering between function and facade. Fewer hands mean fewer events, fewer appearances, and less visibility, which only amplifies Republican pressure and media scrutiny. Edward's move, while personal, forces an institutional reckoning. Can the monarchy continue its full schedule with a staff this lean and a vision this blurred? But there's also an opportunity. Edward's dignified departure may offer a template for future royals. Step back without scandal. Prioritize mental health over optics. Embrace flexibility without tearing down the family. As the Windsors enter a post-Elizabeth era, defined less by hierarchy and more by humanity, Edward's decision becomes a subtle symbol of what the monarchy could become, if it dares to evolve. And so, we come to the final curtain. The prince, who never sought headlines, has made one of the biggest statements in recent royal memory by simply walking away. But he's not disappearing. He's transforming. So what lies ahead for Edward? And what does this moment leave behind for Britain's most famous family? Edward's next steps and the royal future. Prince Edward's next chapter will likely be lived out of view, but not out of impact. Insiders say he plans to focus on his charitable efforts, particularly the Duke of Edinburgh's award, a program he's championed across 140 countries. He'll also spend more time with Sophie and their children, who've largely grown up away from media glare. This isn't a retreat, it's a reprioritization, a royal choosing legacy on his own terms. Don't expect memoirs, don't expect Netflix specials, but do expect a version of Edward who finally seems free from the burden of constantly proving his worth. A man who endured press ridicule, internal rejection, and a lifetime in the royal system, and still chose dignity over drama. His is not a story of rebellion. It's a story of quiet endurance that ended with a choice. A choice to live, not just serve. And in that way, Edward may be one of the most revolutionary royals of all. For the monarchy, this moment is both warning and wisdom. It must adapt, not just in structure, but in spirit. Edward's departure shows that tradition without compassion crumbles, that silence is not the same as support, and that in the end, even the most loyal prince may find the crown too heavy to wear.